Big shout out this week to Abka Def K Jekyll Men Optker Stuver says 1 for having a super sweet name and 2 for being our newest patron. Reminder that the folks who give on Patreon are the reason I'm able to do what I do on the show. I'm super grateful, and I can't wait to share the awesome stuff I have planned for the future with you. If you want to support the work we do, head to patreon.com/thegaytheist manifesto. Thanks, friends.
Your source for news, commentary, discussion, and debate at the intersection of the atheist movement and the LGBT rights movement. This is the Gaytheist Manifesto. Hello, dear friends, and welcome to the Gaytheist Manifesto. I am your host, Callie Wright, and we are long overdue for the conversation we are about to have on the show today. Far too many of us in the queer and trans community can tell stories for days about being bullied for who we are, for being different, for standing out in the crowd in different ways. Our childhoods were filled with bad advice like, oh, just ignore them and they'll stop, even though they never do. And we're told it gets better as a platitude without hearing anything about what the people in our lives are actually doing to make it better. And if you've listened to the show for long enough, you'll certainly have heard me go on and on and on about the power that fandom has to help people in dealing with this stuff. And I've told my own story over and over again about how Star Trek helped me figure out and come to terms with who I was, and how it helped me escape the fear I felt as a kid, knowing how different I was and how I'd be treated with my peers if they figured out who I was. And with those things in mind, I was really excited to learn about the organization we're going to talk about on the show today. The Pop Culture Hero Coalition is the first ever organization that uses the universal appeal of comics, film, and TV to create anti-bullying programs at pop culture events and in schools and communities. And we have one of the founders on the show today. She is Chase Masterson. You might remember her as Lita from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Welcome, Chase.
Hey, Callie, thank you so much for having me.
So this is really cool. I'm super stoked on what you guys are doing. So just kind of tell me the story. How does this thing get started?
It's a very multi-layered beginning, but as I look back, I can see how it all worked really perfectly. In 2008, I started mentoring kids coming out of gangs. And I was working with these kids because I was really angry about my own life. I'd had some bad stuff happen right after Star Trek Deep Space Nine that really devastated my life and my career. And it was horrific. It was serious trauma, stuff that should not have happened. And I was in a lot of pain and a lot of anger. And a friend of mine said, if you want to feel better, go find someone who has it worse than you and help them. And I was like, in my state at that time, because when you're in real depression and trauma, you don't really think of things as better or worse. You just think of like, this is as dark as it gets. Who is as dark as me? You know? And I was really in that place. And I'll be really open here. Previous to that, I was drinking a lot. I'm grateful to say I've been sober for 11 years now.
Wow, congrats. That's awesome.
Thank you. It's helped a lot for me anyway, but it was a really dark and angry place. And the only people that I could think of that were darker and angrier than me were these kids at Homeboy Industries who were getting their lives together after coming out of prison and gangs. And that's just how I was consumed with anger. And I could tell you the details, but it's not really relevant. I think we can all feel nth degree amounts of anger for various reasons. You know, we don't have to qualify it. It's our own pain is our own pain. Mm-hmm. And mine was bad. I look back and I see, well, maybe I could have done this and that to get out of it. But the bottom line is I went there to work with these kids. And I was working with a friend of mine who had a self-help book. And I really liked what was in the book. I'm not a huge proponent on self-help books in general, but this was a really good book. And so I also told him, if you want to see if your book works, come over to Homeboy with me, and we'll see if these principles really stand up. Don't take it to the Downtown Women's Club or Merrill Lynch or whatever. Like, let's see if we can actually help some people. So we walked in and absolutely fell in love with these kids. And this place is a place where I don't know how to even say it. I mean, these people have come from extraordinarily dark circumstances, having been raised in just literal living hell, and they're getting their lives together, and they're incredibly brave, and everyone is welcome. And that's a really incredibly beautiful thing where, like, Crips and Bloods are welcome, and they both will grab a broom and help clean up the place, or help you, in the cafe and make you a muffin or make you a coffee or make you breakfast. And there's, all sorts of things that they work on while they're getting their lives together. All that matters is love and the fact that we're all here on this planet trying to make it and trying to have good lives. And I fell in love with those kids. And really, I think, in that classic way, I was the person that probably learned some of the most. But over a period of time that I've worked with them, and it's 10 years now, I'm still there in several capacities. I heard from most of these kids that the way that they got into this life of pain was that they were bullied into joining gangs. They had not wanted to have painful lives, and then they started, getting jumped in, or their people said, "We will kill you if you don't join us," and so they just path of least resistance. And I realized that bullying is like that. That a lot of times people get bullied and then they become bullies, or they just take the path of least resistance and they chime in with the gang without really considering what it does to the world, what it does to their own lives, what it does to other human lives. And so I started thinking a lot about this dynamic of bullying. And I realized that it was the same, whether it was gang members or kids in school or relationship bullying or war. Basically, aggression has no place on this planet. And when we look at each other and realize our just our human value, and that's it, then we can create a whole different world and huge amounts of healing and create the world that we all deserve. Well, at that point, I know this probably doesn't make much sense as a precursor, but that's what happened with me. And at that point, I heard about a little girl who was bullied in first grade in Evansville, Illinois, for carrying her Star Wars lunchbox to school. Her name was Katie, the Star Wars girl, basically, is what she was known as. And she went home and she cried, "Mom, all the guys at school are bullying me. All the boys are saying, you can't like Star Wars. You're a girl. Girls don't like Star Wars." But it was because Katie was carrying her Star Wars lunchbox and she asked to carry her pink lunchbox instead. And Carrie, her mom, said, "Katie, you be you. You can be whoever you want. You can love whatever you want. You can love whoever you want. You have every right to be who you are." And Carrie wrote a blog post that night, and she said, if there's any female out there who loves Star Wars and loves science fiction or loves science, could you please just write a little note to encourage my daughter? Well, Huffington Post picked that up and it went viral. And hundreds of us chimed in. Thousands of people saw the post and a lot of people tweeted it, and hundreds of people chimed in. "Katie, you be you. You get to be who you are." And so Katie was very encouraged, and Carrie, the mom, decided, she realized that there was a huge issue, that so many people had chimed in saying, "I've also been gender bullied. I've also been bullied for being who I am. This is very painful, but I'm here to tell you, you be you." And so Carrie, who is a writer, wonderful writer, decided to write a book. And HarperCollins bought the concept. And she asked me to do an interview for the book because I was one of the people that chimed in, and we kept in touch. And I'll just tell you one more side note, which is fun. She asked me to put her in touch with any other actors who could be interviewed. And I put her in touch with Peter Mayhew. So now Katie, who's bullied in first grade for loving Star Wars, is friends with the real Chewbacca. Don't fuck with us.
Oh, that's so good.
Right?
Oh my
Right.
God, I love that so much.
Oh, we will go out of our way to avenge. And we do. So anyway, Carrie asked me, this was in 2000, gosh, it started in 2010. And 2013, the book was ready, and she asked me to help her get it into Comic-Con. So I had been working with Homeboy for 5 years and really doing my best, but knowing that we were doing a lot of good. And just to let you know, the LGBTQI community at Homeboy was really suffering and having a really hard time, because the gang community is not one that was very open or very friendly to our LGBTQI kids. And I spoke with so many of those kids who came out and were really comforted to find a voice in even in the midst of that was welcoming of who they are. So I thought all about that, all of this, and I said, yes, I'll get your book into Comic-Con, because I'd been going since like the earth was cooling, and since there were only 25,000 people at Comic-Con, I said, yes, I can get your book in, but let's do more. Let's get the entire world of pop culture behind us, and let's make a stand for inclusion and make a stand to let everybody know they are valued and cherished for being who they are. And so I said, let's form a coalition. Let's just get everybody involved. And she's like, okay. And I was like, okay, I'll get back to you. So I got off the phone and I was like, oh shit, I just said, we'll form a coalition. What am I going to do now? I don't do that. I don't know how to do that. So I thought, okay, who do you get if you want to form a coalition? The United Nations. So I called the United Nations, San Diego. I called them cold. I looked up their number online, and I said, hi, this is Chase Masterson from Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and I'm going to form a coalition to end bullying, and we're going to go to Comic-Con, and you guys end bullying, right? With countries, right? So would you like to join us? And they said, oh my God, we've always wanted to go to Comic-Con.
Oh, that's so good.
Is that fantastic? So I thought, okay, well, let's try this. The second place I called was No Hate, because I'd done a photo shoot. I knew the guys. I could get through to them anyway through Roddenberry, and I got through. And I said, "Would you guys come to Comic-Con for us? Because I don't think you guys had ever been, right?" And they said, "Oh my God, we've always wanted to go to Comic-Con." So No Hate was on board. So I was like, "Okay, well, I'm calling GLSEN," and GLSEN said the same thing. And then I called then Carrie called the Anti-Defamation League and Girl Scouts of America. And who else? I forget who else that year. It was incredible. We bat 1,000. Every organization that we asked to come on board came on board. And it was diverse and wonderful and inclusive and cherishing. And I'll just say right now, I hate the word tolerant. Tolerant is like, okay, we'll let you be you. But no, it was just balls out cherishing. And I was enthused and grateful and motivated. And we've been going nonstop ever since.
God, that's incredible. And like I was like tearing up as you were talking about that, because like I remember as a kid I was not out as queer or trans as a kid, but like I knew who I was, and I knew enough to know that like the things that I were, like it wasn't okay to be that. And like the biggest way that I stood out as a kid was that I was just an unapologetic Star Trek nerd. Like I was learning how to speak Klingon, and I would like wear my little comm badge pin, and like I would use every school project as an excuse to talk about Star Trek. And I even I performed a Klingon ritual in front of the class once, and was speaking Klingon and everything. And
wow.
Yeah, I was hardcore. I still am.
That is hardcore, I have to say.
But like I almost bullied myself as a kid around things like that, because I knew that like these people were not laughing with me. They were laughing at me. But like I played into that role because that's how that's like the position that I could put myself in and still be part of the peer group. As I was this weird kid who did this weird stuff that like I was part of the group, but like as the foil, as the comic relief. And I was the loneliest Star Trek fan in the world as a kid. I had literally one other person that I was friends with that liked Star Trek anywhere near as much as I did. And we were only friends for like a year. And so, gosh, that resonates really, really hard with me. And I mean, even now as an adult, getting to meet and talk with you and a lot of the other Star Trek actors, and with Rod Roddenberry at Star Trek Las Vegas, and realizing like, it's not just the fictional world. Like these people in real life, like really have my back. Like even as an adult, like it's an amazing thing, and it's super empowering, and it kind of gives me the confidence to go out and do things and speak up on behalf of our community and stuff. And so like I'm such a fan of this approach because it takes like the two most important things in the world to me, like fandom and nerdiness and geekdom, specifically in Star Trek, but also advocacy for people who are marginalized and bullied. And I mean, especially queer and trans folks. Like I was looking at statistics and I saw it was something like 19% of kids in grade 9 through 12 report being cyberbullied. If we talk about LGBTQ kids, it's 55%.
Yeah.
That is mind blowing. And I think there is a huge overlap between queer and trans kids and the whole like nerd geekdom thing. And so like, I think it's a really unique way to create space for those folks.
Yeah. Oh my God. So true. And just one is too many, but 55%. And there have been, other statistics are horrifically high, and yes, this is a good way in because there's so many directions I could go in this, but I'll just say, yes, this is important because these stories matter, and stories are the way that hearts change. Stories are the way that we can realize, or one of the ways we can realize our worth, our value, our own rights. Stories are one of the ways that we can heal and stop bullying ourselves, and stop leaving the door open for it. Although a lot of times they'll keep breaking it down, but stories matter. And I will just say this also about the percentage of bullying. I know that we have a lot of research on our site, which I put all of that together, and I'm really surprised that it's not higher, because most people tell me they've been bullied. Most people that I come across in my daily life or have ever come across have told me they've been bullied. So to hear that it's 19 or 55%, that shocks me. I think it's actually a lot higher.
Oh yeah,
but
I agree.
Yeah, I will tell you that when you and I were first talking, and I was like, well, I'll just tell you this, because we get a lot of requests to do podcast interviews and stuff, and
sure.
And I don't usually have time, but I went to your Twitter and I looked at I think it was your last tweet at that point, where you said you were having trouble living in a world, or wanting to live in a world where there was a probability or a key possibility that you would be assaulted. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, that's it. I'm going to do this podcast. It was, we just had to find a time, but no one should have to live like that. And when statistics are that high, and there are people, I've heard that numerous times this weekend from LGBTQI people that have come up and said, and just been open at the table, knowing that I do this work. And this is something that we can't allow this as a society. It's unthinkable.
And it's such a powerful way to connect folks, because I've talked to people at cons who express maybe not hostility, but just maybe a level of ambivalence about queer or trans stuff, specifically. Normally when I go to cons, I work for the gays in space folks. And, we talk about like, oh yeah, we throw big gay Star Trek parties and it's a lot of fun. But like also there are these serious issues that, we're trying to raise conversations around sort of in the context of sci-fi and fandom and specifically Star Trek in our case. And I remember a conversation I had with a guy who just zero knowledge, zero awareness of any of this kind of stuff. And I was like, hey, do you remember that Star Trek The Next Generation episode, The Outcast? And he's like, yeah. It's the one with the genderless species and Riker falls in love with one of them. And I was like, so think about that in the context of being gay or being transgender. And he was like, whoa. It was a light switch flipped on. And
right.
Like forever, that guy is going to think differently. And
right.
And so I think it's one of those important things where we sort of, obviously there's a lot of energy around the subjects of sexuality and gender identity and all of that sort of stuff in our culture. And some people, I think, get turned off to the conversation just because they feel like, oh, I'm going to wade in and I'm getting myself involved in a mess here. But like, if you turn it around and you say, well, you remember this episode of Star Trek and here's all of this stuff.
Right.
And they're like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense now. And so it's an amazing way to connect with folks. And so, sort of like bringing that into the real world, like what are some of the other things that you guys do as an organization? Like, I know you do cons, and I saw something on your website about a curriculum that you're developing. I'm really interested in that kind of stuff.
Thank you so much. Well, this stuff is so exciting. And can I just chime in on one thing you just said?
Please.
I started to laugh when I said right a minute ago, and it's because when there are Star Trek fans that are hardcore Star Trek fans, they know this work. They not this work. They know this world. They know the world that Roddenberry set up, which is based on infinite diversity and infinite combinations, and it just blows my mind that Star Trek fans are still. I mean, not that they are. That some Star Trek fans are still bigoted. Like
right.
if I post something on my Facebook page and I have almost 100% the people on the page are Star Trek fans, and then I get reamed for speaking out against Trump and his homophobic, racist, misogynistic policies, you go, wait, I thought you were watching this show. And so I guess sometimes we have to really point it out, like to rub people's nose in it. Look at that story. This is what it's saying.
Well, right. And when it was known in Star Trek Discovery that the lead was going to be a black woman and the internet was just going nuts. And I'm like, have you guys missed the last 50 years of this?
Right.
Like,
exactly. Like, what is wrong with you people? Where did this come from? Yeah, it's not just spaceships. It's not just CGI, folks. I don't know how they missed all that. But anyway, I just had to get that out of my system.
Yeah,
okay.
No, I'm 100% there.
Yeah, the actors talk about that quite a lot. Like, what? Could you believe? So anyway, so a lot of us did speak out on the Las Vegas stage about stuff. And we've been told, that occasionally it does upset people, and all we can say is, wow. Anyway, I just had to get that out of my system.
No, you're right. And like, while we're on that subject, that just blows my mind as well, because it's like, so yes, you're an actor, you're in Star Trek. It's a big deal. It's a Star Trek convention. We're all Star Trek fans, but like, you're also an autonomous person that gets to have your own thoughts and feelings. And it blows my mind that people don't recognize that. Like, right. You're just there to be the object of my fandom. Like, no, that's not how this works.
Right. Well, exactly. I get to say what I want, and so do we all. And I wasn't going to not say lives are at stake here. It's our first job to be a human, and second job to be whatever, third job, whatever, maybe ninth or 10th is to be an actor.
Right.
And so anyway, that. But, that also speaks to what is a good segue to the next subject, which is our formation of curriculum. And I think the reason that speaks to that is that people's minds are so entrenched by the values and beliefs that they were taught. And I'm using the word values loosely.
Right.
when they were kids, when they were growing up, by whoever it was, by parents, teachers, peers, churches, quote unquote. I mean, it just, a lot of people don't think autonomously until they have some sort of epiphany, and we want that to happen sooner.
Right.
And so we were thinking of doing a curriculum. I posed the idea to Carrie in 2000. I think it was 2015. Well, there's so much to say here, but we were starting to talk about it, and then in late 2015, I did a Comic-Con where it was maybe 30 people in the audience, probably less, between 20 and 30 people in the audience for my talk about the coalition. And one of the people was a woman on a school board in Connecticut. And she said, "This was incredible. You should do this work in schools, and you should talk to Yale School of Psychology." And I was like, "Oh, sure. Have them call me. Of course we should talk to them." And she said, "No, really, this is going to be good. Just let me put you in touch, and I will, and you'll see what they do." So she put us in touch, and the head of the Yale School of Psychology, Center for Emotional Intelligence, his name is Dr. Mark Brackett. He got right back to me, and we scheduled a call for like 2 months later. He had 20 minutes. And so, it was like, we're going to get to pitch our program. And he loved what we're doing and said that this is very much in the lines of what they are trying to do in schools, and doing very well. But he said that for older kids, they don't really have a good opening, like a good point of connectivity with the kids. And he said he thought that this would work really well. So we put together with this woman in Connecticut a symposium, basically, that was to create Connecticut as the first state that had a statewide program against bullying, like an official program, which no state has at this point. And we, sorry, there's so many details. Anyway, we were having a preliminary meeting with Mark, Carrie, and, co-founder Carrie and Mark and me. And Mark was talking about the type of work that they do and want to do and the kind of crossover with this work. And Carrie piped up, "Well, what we should do is when we finish our curriculum, we should probably just license it to you." And I was like, "Oh my God, Carrie, how embarrassing. You don't license your work to Yale." And Mark said, "That's a really good idea." So we started at that point putting this curriculum together. We hadn't actually even really started it, but now it's 2 years later. We have almost completed the curriculum. It's a 35-point curriculum for 7th and 8th grades, because we all know middle school is hell.
Oh, yeah.
And it covers identity and resilience and self-esteem, self-compassion, self-worth, compassion, empathy. We talk about being an ally. We talk about working against social bias and implicit bias, structural bias. We talk about conflict resolution and restorative justice, and all the things that we wish we had when we were in school, in a program that is a 35-point program that was created by psychologists. Oh, I forgot that part. So we partnered with some incredible pop culture savvy psychologists and middle school teachers to create this curriculum. So we have real experts who are creating this to go into health classes in schools. And it will fit Common Core curriculum in places that require that. And we're going to pilot it in the fall.
God, that's incredible.
Thank you. And it's all based around heroes' journeys. It's all based around these stories. Like, hey, for instance, you remember that episode of The Flash when this happened? How does that apply to what's happening in your life? What about this? What about Wonder Woman? How about Batgirl? Yay. And how about all of these types of representation that are finally beginning to happen in Supergirl, etc.
Right, which, oh my God, I'm so excited about Supergirl. Yeah, and it's, I love that this is happening. It's kind of weird to me that it hasn't happened until now, though, because, I mean, if you look at those stories, I mean, superhero stories were kind of invented to be that sort of like, the nerdy kid who's not popular as something to hold on to, right? Like, I mean, so many superheroes' journeys are that. Like, I was the nerdy, unpopular kid, and then I get bit by a spider, and now I'm a superhero. Like, that kind of stuff. And
right.
that's such a unique way to wrap that into a school curriculum, and to, people who are actually experts in psychology. And so I'm interested in some of the specifics around this, because I think there are a lot of really bad ideas in our culture. One about what bullying looks like and how to deal with it, how to prevent it. Because, I mean, most of the advice I got as a kid when I was being teased for being fat or being teased for being a Star Trek fan or any of that kind of stuff is like, well, just ignore them, they'll go away. And it's like, have you looked at it? Like, it doesn't work that way. Or right. that sort of like, well, it gets better. And it's like, I mean, it does kind of, if you end up in the right social circles, which thankfully I did. As I grew up, I got more in with people who were into the same things I was, and, didn't care that I was fat or whatever. So can you give me some of the specifics around like how this stuff actually works, and how you prevent people from acting this way, or how you help people deal with it?
I'm kind of backtracking here a bit to what you said in terms of, ignore it and it'll go away. It doesn't, obviously. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but it, I'll tell you, in our Comic-Con panels, Carrie, early on, she started doing this, asking, and here's a room full of people, like there's, 300 people. How many of you guys were bullied in the last 5 years? And like lots of hands go up. How many in the last 10 years? Hands up. How about 20? Hands are still up. How about 25, 30? How about 35 years? How many of you people were bullied 40 years ago? And hands are still up. And we've had people into their 80s come to our panel and say, it still hurts. And what a world. How are we allowing ourselves to do this as a planet? What do we think we're here for? What do you think other people are here for? And most of all, how do you want to be treated? People need to be asked that. What do you want from your life? And don't you imagine that this person wants the same from theirs? And it really is opening up conversations. That's one of the most important things, and really shining a spotlight on hate and on bias and on indifference, and people getting to know and see each other as human. And so often our lives are so insulated. When you leave your home base and get out and meet new people, you discover, oh, these people are really human. They're nice. They're lovely. They eat food like I do. They breathe air, and you stop demonizing people. And so introducing people and kids to other ways than their own is incredibly powerful. There's one exercise where people are asked, do you see this person who is entirely, quote unquote, different? What do you think that person likes to eat? And if you can name a thing, then you can start thinking, oh, well, maybe they like this other thing too. And tests show that people start seeing each other as with more empathy than simply by being asked that question. So there are all sorts of exercises, and I'm being pretty vague here because there's just a lot. There's 35 points to this, and everything has there's a huge amount. It's a very dense curriculum, but it's exercises and thought processes, and kids writing stuff out, and kids meeting people that they may not have otherwise met, and getting to know people on a more getting to know people and characters on a closer basis, and being asked questions, and just basically taught through pop culture stories, which are fun. So we're teaching kids using their language.
Part of what is so frustrating about this to me is that, like, I feel like we live in a world that makes this incredibly complicated when it doesn't really have to be.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
like I've had so many conversations with people because aside from being trans and queer and a woman, like I'm relatively privileged. I have a decent middle class job, support a family, good health insurance, all of that sort of stuff. And so like I have the capacity to do this sort of emotional labor where I'll go on conservative talk radio and basically try to convince people that I'm a human being, and like that kind of like really exhaustive stuff. But like so many of the stories that I tell her, it's like what do you think I do when I get home from work at night? Like
Right.
I give my wife a hug and we figure out dinner, and like we think
Right.
about what we're going to watch on Netflix. Like, what do you think, what do you
Right.
think we are like
Right.
it's so difficult because I do all of this stuff, and then I will, somebody's mind will be changed and it feels really good. And then I think back and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like that it's so much effort for something that should be so basic.
And if we can show people in school that inclusion is the way to be, and it's so easy, and it's such a no-brainer, and it doesn't go against any rules. It's just ridiculous. I mean, I'm struggling to even think of what to even say here. It's such a no-brainer. Like you think there's something that shouldn't allow this? No, there's not. Where did you even get that? That's ridiculous. People have a right to be who they are, everyone.
I'm curious about your thoughts, seeing all of this stuff and speaking with these folks, because, we hear a lot about like kids being sort of a blank slate, right? Like kids are taught to hate. It's not inherent. It's we as adults teach kids that, being different is bad, or like, these people aren't to be trusted and that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I see two sides of that argument, because I do think, sadly, that there is something inherent to being a human being that like we're automatically sort of distrustful of situations that are different. And I think it's part of evolutionary history, right? Like if we don't know what this is, it could be a threat to me. But then I think about stories about one of my best friends, his wife's son. They were telling him about me coming out as trans and transitioning. And this kid's response was literally, okay, so her name's Callie now, and I use she, her pronouns now. And they're like, yeah. And he said, okay, I just don't want to know what she's doing with her penis. Like that was as complicated as the conversation had to be with this kid. And so like there's one level on which where I think like we teach this to kids, and it can be as simple as fixing ourselves and therefore fixing what we teach to kids. But there's also part of me that thinks that sort of fear and mistrust of the other is sort of inherent. Do you have thoughts on that?
I think you're absolutely right. I think we teach kids fear and mistrust. And it's important to keep in mind that all of that is just based in fear. It's all bullying and all lack of inclusion is always based in fear. And that's another big thing that we talk about a lot on our panels and in our curriculum. You have to recognize. Nobody has to do anything, but we do best when we recognize people's bigotry for what it is. It is fear, and it can hurt less if we separate it from ourselves and say, this is fear. It has nothing to do with me. It's their own fear. It's actually really not related to me. I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but like one exercise that I've done with kids at schools and also in panels is like you hold out something and you go, "Hi, here's a piece of shit." And does that mean you have to take it? No. No. If someone hands you a piece of shit, it's not yours. It has nothing to do with you. It's not related to you. You don't have to ingest it. You don't have to make it part of you. You can just go, "Ooh, why are you doing that? That's about you, not about me." And it's really important to see it in that light and to see that hurt people and healed people heal people. So if someone is reaching out with pain or rejection, it's most likely because they have fear inside. And they were taught that. Their child heart was hurt by someone teaching them to be afraid, and so they were. And that person that taught them to be afraid was also afraid. And it's a chain, it's a cycle. And we want to break that cycle and get in there and say, you don't have to have this hate and bigotry. And if you're being subjected to it, you don't have to feel that way. You don't have to be treated that way. Come here. You have family. You have community.
Yeah, and that's a thing that I struggle with a lot because I think often about that exact dynamic, the whole, hurt people thing. And I think, on one hand, it's important to recognize that. But I think sometimes it crosses over into, I have this person who hates me, who is mistreating me and being terrible to me. And I'm being taught that my reaction to that has to be empathy, sympathy, compassion for that person. And then it's my job to fix that person. And there's,
oh God, no,
well,
no,
right.
I don't mean that.
No. I don't think that's what you were saying. I think that's sort of one of the pervasive ideas around that, around this whole concept in our society, because if we want people to stop doing that, in a way that kind of is what has to happen, right? What that illustrates in my mind is the importance of allyship.
Yes.
Because if I'm being mistreated for who I am, at that point, like, my job is to protect myself and remove myself from that situation and do what I can to prevent that from happening. But if we want to stop this from happening, people in positions of power need to be the ones who are stepping forward to sort of, I guess, run defense and prevent these things from happening in the future. And so I think it's a really powerful illustration of why we need allies in situations like that.
Absolutely. That's why we're here, I believe, on the planet. If there is a why, that's what humanity should be about, is, because if we all only stand up for ourselves, what a world that is. That's kind of gross. And standing up for other people is the only, sometimes, and being stood up for is the only thing that will get us through. I mean, if we're really hurting, the last thing you want to be thinking of is, oh, I'm empathy and here, let me teach you. No, you're just feeling like, toward the person that's hurting you, you're feeling like, shut up and go away. Stop it.
Yep.
And I think it's wrong for society to put this thing on, oh, just pray for them. Just feel sorry for them. Oh God, this is not, no. You know what? You have a right to be hurt. You have a right to be angry. You have a right to feel betrayed by the fact that another human being is doing this to you. And of course you have a right to feel betrayed if nobody else is standing up for you. In the final analysis, separating it and knowing that it's because this person is hurting is for your own good.
Mm-hmm.
And if it ends up being for their own good, that's good too. But it's not your job to fix anybody. It's your job to get yourself to a place that's safe, physically and emotionally and psychologically. And it's our job to make sure that people around us have that safety, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why I do what I do. One of my big soapboxes on activism, I've said it a million times on the show and I'm going to say it again. So I apologize, folks listening, if you've heard this before, but it's vitally important that I think we get in our feelings very often about the change that we can or can't affect based on our position in life. And, not everyone has a podcast. Not everybody has been an actor on a TV show. Not everybody is a comic book writer with a massive platform. But we all have spheres of influence, and whether that's our friend group, people at work, people on social media, whatever. And I think we get these ideas about all of these really big things that we have to do. And if we're not marching in the streets or, have a podcast with thousands of listeners or a TV show or whatever, that we can't be effective and that we can't make a difference and that we can't help. And I think that's probably one of the most pervasively bad ideas in our culture. We all have spheres of influence and we all have the ability to affect change at a certain level. And if that means starting a nonprofit, then do that. If it means starting a podcast, do that. If it means writing up some spreadsheets for a local nonprofit food bank, everything counts, everything matters, and everything makes a difference. And I am such a huge fan of people taking novel approaches to things and combining things that on the outside, from an outsider's perspective, from people who aren't involved in the community, it may not make a lot of sense. It may be weird that we're talking about comic books and sci-fi and fandom and pop culture and using that to help end bullying and to help people heal. And from people who don't exist in that culture, that may be kind of an odd sort of idiosyncratic way of doing things. But for those of us on the inside of fandom, I think so many of us are like, where has this been? This is so obvious and amazing. And I feel like maybe some of the best ideas are, gosh, why hasn't this been happening forever?
Right. Absolutely.
But I love what you guys are doing. It means a lot to me as a person who, I occasionally experience people being mean on the internet, but thankfully I've learned to sort of let that stuff wash off of me. So I'm not necessarily a direct beneficiary, but I know, just remembering back to the ways that I felt as a kid, especially, being bullied for being different, especially around the ways that I loved Star Trek and sci-fi and that kind of stuff. It means the world to me to see this kind of stuff happening. I'm super excited about what you guys are doing. I really, really appreciate you coming on the show, and I am super excited to support you guys however I can.
Allie, thank you so much. That's just so lovely. All of it is so lovely. And you have a fantastic voice. You have an important and powerful voice. And it's because you decided to make it so. You decided to do a podcast and you're doing it. And there are so many different ways. You're right. It's a good thing, but it also doesn't have to be a podcast. It could be somebody who's listening right now who knows that somebody else is having a hard time and just reaching out and going, hey, I'm here for you.
Yep.
That is heroism. And that can save a life. And saving one life is just as important as saving hundreds or thousands. You know what I'm saying? It is. There is no limit to the amount of good we can do if we just keep our eyes open and are willing to do good one person at a time, to spread empathy and help people heal one person at a time. It's, and that can just happen. You see somebody in the corner of the room or the corner of the internet and you go, wow, I don't want that person feeling sad and lonely. I don't want to take a chance that person isn't going to be here tomorrow. Let me reach out. And how beautiful is that? It doesn't have to be a huge thing or a podcast or an organization. And sometimes there is a lot of power in just doing the next right thing. I mean, I'll just tell you, like Dan Deevy, he started out Gays in Space. He had a podcast that wasn't on LGBTQI inclusion. It was on it was on entertainment, and he decided to do Gays in Space, and I'm helping them get their nonprofit status now, because we met years ago doing an unrelated podcast. I mean, I guess I'm making 2 points, is that you never know, if you do the next right thing, what you can build it to. But there's nothing greater than just helping one person at a time. If one person hears this podcast and is touched or affected or emboldened or feels stronger or gets some sort of healing out of it, that's enough. You've had my full permission after you hear from that one person to take this down, because that's all we need. Do you know what I'm saying?
No, I agree wholeheartedly. And that's, I have that feeling every time I get an email or a Facebook message from somebody saying that, you know, hey, this thing that you talked about, it really meant a lot to me. I really learned something, or I felt included. I felt spoken up for. I felt defended. That's literally why I do what I do. And I feel like that's why you do what you do. And it's just, it's amazing to me. And again, I think it's really important, one, to say that even seemingly small things make a difference. And I also think it's very important to point out that if you are the person who needs to be on the receiving end of those small things, taking care of yourself is activism as well. If you don't have the capacity or the ability to be that person who's helping other people, that's not a mark on you. That's not a bad, that's not a mark against you as a person, because we all need to be that person. I need to be that person sometimes. I mean, I have a podcast and I talk about super vulnerable and difficult things all of the time. And you know what? Sometimes I need to be the person who somebody's checking on, and it's okay to be that person too.
Absolutely. Even if you're only that person,
Yep.
That's where you are. There's nothing wrong with that. And don't bully yourself because you're not someone else, ever. There are good reasons for, except for hate, there are good reasons for everyone being where they are right now. Do you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So don't ever bully yourself. It's not right. It's not fair. And I love what you said, Callie. I know we're getting to the 1 hour mark, but I was listening to your last podcast in prep for this one. And I just want to say, I love how you said for people to reach out if they need help, and that we are here, and that there's community and people defending and people supporting. You said it way much better than I'm saying it now, but you have such a great, beautiful heart. And I just want to really say, yay, you, and keep up the beautiful work.
Oh gosh, I'm going to cry. Thank you. Well, I think that, tell us the practical stuff. Where can we find out more about what y'all are doing and how we can support?
Thank you so much. So, on social media, we're at Superhero IRL. That's Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Superhero IRL. And on our website is popculturehero.org. And if anybody wants to support, we have a t-shirt drive that's funding our work. Basically, that's how we create these programs, because we don't really qualify for many grants yet, because we're still in the process of creating this curriculum. But the t-shirts say "Be Kind," and they are going to be available on our website. But just find us on social media and let us know you like one, and we'll find you and let you know where you can get them. There you go.
Well, I will have all of those links in the show notes. Chase, I cannot thank you enough for this. This was a great conversation, and never imagined in a million years I'd have a Star Trek person on my podcast, and dream come true. Thank you.
Well, Callie, thank you for what you do. It has been an honor to talk with you. You're amazing. So keep up the great work.
And that, my friends, is going to do it for this episode of the Gaytheist Manifesto. If you think what we do here is important, please share this around to your friends. Search the Gaytheist Manifesto on Facebook and Twitter to find us there. I am at Gaytheist Callie on Twitter. You can email us at podcast@thegaytheistmanifesto.com. We're a part of the Trans Podcaster Visibility Initiative. We're a group of trans podcasting badasses working to bring more trans voices into podcasting and other content creation. Search the Trans Podcaster Visibility Initiative on Facebook for more info. If you want to support the show and the activism we do, you can head to Patreon patreon.com/theGaytheist Manifesto and make a per episode donation as little as $1 per episode. And if you can't do that, you can still give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and share us around to your friends. It all helps and it all makes a difference. Before we go, I want you to know that if you're lost, you're hurting, you're scared, if you feel like no one cares and no one understands, you need to know there's a community out here that loves you, cares for you, knows that you're capable of amazing things, and that you are worthy of love. If you're struggling, please don't be afraid to reach out. Until next time, friends, this is the Gaytheist Manifesto.